Hello, my name's Louisa Mitchell, and I'm the Chief Executive of West London Zone for Children and Young People. We aim to bridge the opportunity gap for children and young people in a very unequal part of West London, where some of the lowest income families live next to some of the wealthiest streets. We give children the support they need to overcome challenges and achieve their goals. Particularly at the moment, this is really important, as the children who most need help and opportunities aren't necessarily getting them. We provide a personalised 2-year programme of support for every child we work with, so that they each get the right support at the right time, in the right way. Our team of trusted adults, called link workers, are based full-time in a school and see the children every day and know them really well. They work in partnership with organisations working locally to provide the support that each child needs. We estimate that there are 9,500 children aged 4 to 16 in our area of West London who would benefit from our support. We've supported 1,500 children and young people so far. To help us reach more children and support them to overcome challenges and achieve their goals, Ben Bailey-Smith has joined the West London Zone team as our new ambassador. To celebrate Ben joining us, award-winning journalist Emily Maitlis sat down with Ben to discuss his motivations for joining us and the work needed to support children and young people in West London.
Ben, first of all, welcome. This is a great fit for you, the West London Zone for Children and Young People. How did you first come to hear about their work?
It was actually brought to my attention via my agent, and it was just a lovely email to get because it's something that is really close to my heart. And funnily enough, when I told my wife about it, she was like, "Oh, those guys are amazing." And I thought, yeah, my instinct was right. I definitely want to do something with these guys.
Yeah, because the reputation's ahead of them. And this feels very personal in a sense. You grew up in West London. Your own childhood was in the neighbourhood here. Yeah. When you sort of think back, and I know you grew up in a family of lots of girls, women, brother, what was the sort of sense you had of the community in which you were raised then?
Well, I was born in Kilburn. I spent the first sort of 10 years of my life there, and then moved to Willesden, which is just up the road, so not entirely global. But yeah, my memories of those early days, it was a very, very vibrant area, and there was just lots and lots of different sorts of people from all walks of life. And you know, in Kilburn, I lived on a council estate that had, you know, I mean, it's like a halls of residence. You've got just people from all over the world just on your floor, you know, on every level, and behind every door there's a different kind of person with different kinds of issues. But we all got on, you know. I really remember that. And I think it was growing up where I grew up was kind of a baptism of fire. We were all sort of thrown into this kind of melting pot. And I think different kids dealt with it in different ways. Like I realized pretty early on, I think, by the time I was at secondary school, how much of an advantage I had not having English as a second language, for example. You know, there were kids with various difficulties going on in terms of economically and whatnot, or, you know, breakups within their family or social structure. But they also were having to learn English in school at the same time, you know. So that, like, these kids were having to work doubly hard. And I do remember feeling, wow, that must have been tough. And then on the next level, there were kids that just fell by the wayside, you know, kids in my class and kids in my year who just struggled for other reasons that were maybe unseen, you know. Might not have been a language thing, might have been something personal that happened in their home, could have been certain difficulties that were happening behind closed doors. And I did, especially again, and get to secondary, you start to see kids falling away. And some I'd stay in touch with, some I wouldn't. So some stories I knew, some I didn't, you know.
Did you wonder about those kids a lot?
Yeah,
I mean, was that something?
yeah, most definitely. And, you know, my sister's a writer, and she's written a lot about her memories of those times. And she's often either referenced or created an allusion to kids that she remembers disappearing, and then coming back across them and finding out their stories. And I think, yeah, I've always been acutely aware of it. And on top of that, I guess, you know, a lot of people might look at a celebrity, in inverted commas, ambassador and think, oh yeah, it's just something they feel they should do to boost their profile or improve their PR. But actually, it's an important point to make that when I was 17, I started working as a youth worker because my mum was a youth worker. It was an easy job to get into as a summer job, working with little kids. So I never stopped being aware, really. I was a youth worker from that point on for another 11, nearly 12 years before I started doing stand-up comedy. So
yeah, a lot of your work has drawn you to the sort of the lives of children, whether it's from youth work, whether it's your own shows that you've done for kids and young people, CBBC, the music as well. What do you get? I mean, what is the inspiration, if you like, that you get from doing this work with kids? Why do you find it so important?
It's manifold, to be honest. On a very selfish base level, it makes me feel like I'm doing something good. It makes me feel better about myself. That's just on a very selfish base level. The rest of it is much, much deeper. First and foremost, I truly believe that I was incredibly fortunate in having encouragement and love. I think without those things, I definitely would have struggled because I was not an academic. I wasn't a huge fan of the school experience. I loved primary school, but secondary school, not so much. And I think it would have been easy for me to completely lose my way. But actually, love and encouragement and feeling safe, like living in what felt like a safe environment, gave me the confidence to express myself creatively, because all kids are creative, but whether you carry on pursuing that, I mean, all kids have the gift of the gab like you do, and then that thirst for knowledge like you would have had at a very early age, but without the safety net of love and encouragement and a safe environment, do they go on to be the journalist Emily Maitlis? Do you know what I mean? So I think for me, it's an opportunity to be a part of something, an organization that can help bolster that safe environment, help create an atmosphere of encouragement. And that gives every kid a chance, because there's nothing more upsetting to me than the unbelievable inequality around the world, but like it's really stark in the UK, and it's embarrassing because we're not a third world country. We're incredible achievers at the highest level, British people, and I'm so proud to be British. But what upsets me is the idea that not everybody has the opportunity, and what we love to call a free country, everyone can do whatever they want, doesn't actually work out that way, because some people are already swimming upstream before they've even had a chance to prove themselves,
So if you were coming to the West London Zone, some people will be coming to hear about the West London Zone for the first time. If you pinpointed what you think the most valuable thing that they do for children and young people, how would you sort of put that in a nutshell? What do they really offer people in West London, in the communities that you're talking about?
I think what they offer is practical solutions to what is a very hard, it's a very hard thing to quantify, like a child's happiness, the way they feel. I think the West London Zone, with all of their little, all of their workers in all of these different places across, more than one borough, going in there and making kids feel worthy and encouraging them to achieve, it's just priceless. To have that feeling of somebody cares and somebody is not giving up on you, I think that really emanates from the work that they do. And I know from working with kids for as long as I have, it means something, it really does.
And we want to see, I guess, what they talk about, the arc of progress, things getting better. But when you look at 2020, it's been really, really challenging. If we've asked our kids not to go to school or to try and work from home, or, we've expected them to cope with not having friends around, or the self-isolation. For a lot of people, it's been very lonely. It's been very challenging. It's been very difficult. Do you think that in this year that we've seen West London, COVID, being changed? I mean, I guess you could say the whole world has changed, but do you think something has fundamentally gone backwards?
I'd hate to say things have gone backwards, but it definitely feels like life is on a frustrating pause, you know? I mean, this year, 2020, Brent, the borough that I'm from in West London, was going to be the borough of culture. And there was all sorts of events that were planned. I was involved in a couple of them. And it was going to be this huge celebration of what is, you know, a borough with a lot of poverty, a lot of difficulty, but with a lot of hope and a lot of sense of community. And then that was taken away. So it really does feel like so much has been taken away from children and from that idea of hope. That's how we get by, right? We all hope for a better future. That's how we get by in life. And so much of that seems to have been stripped away by this virus. But I think the thing to focus on is that there's no one person to blame. You can't direct all your ire and anger at one. It's this huge uncontrollable thing, and we're all in it together. And I know some people are doing better than others, and you see the inequality come back within this pandemic. But we are all suffering in different ways from this virus, and there's nobody who is free of it. So the focus for me is always, let's try and strengthen just with that. And it is super hard. I mean, talking to my wife, she teaches at year 5, and she was saying kids coming back, there's so many who have just like, they've fallen so far behind and are really struggling to just slot back into the day-to-day of school, whereas other kids are just like raring to go, you know. And similarly, over that lockdown period, some kids wouldn't stop working, submitting work to their teachers, working so hard every day, really engaging, and others never even logged on once, you know.
And maybe this is a hard one, but with a kind of a glass half full look at the world, I mean, do you think good has come of this? Do you think we've learnt different things, or do you think it has opened the door for more equality, or for more people to kind of think around the day job, or you know, what they've been focusing on without looking around them?
I think what it has done, I don't know if it's actively changed things for the better, but what it's definitely done is shone a light on things that weren't working, right? So like you say, working from home, there was a lot of people trying to get to work, and the commute was a mess, be that on trains that don't run on time or are ridiculously overpriced, or roads that are gridlocked because of everybody traveling at the same time, making people miserable, adding another job to their job, if you like.
Yeah.
It shone a light on that. It shone a light on inequality, because people were at the start were being attacked for going to parks and whatnot. But then at the same time, when we looked at the demographic, you thought, well, actually, a lot of these people live in tower blocks or in places without gardens. It's fine for us with our big gardens to say, oh, how could they? You know, so we were shining a light on certain awkward conversations that maybe needed to be had, which I think is a positive. And now you're seeing with things opening up more, you're seeing people not going back to work. They're working in a different way, you know. You're seeing different ways of raising awareness around hygiene. You know, there's lots of things that maybe should have happened before that we've been forced to look at now. And like you say, glass half full, I would say that is one of the big positives. We're actually having to stop and think a bit more, rather than just, you know, bulldozing our way through life blindly. We do have to think about ourselves and our loved ones and others, strangers, more.
We'll talk about your role as ambassador at the end. Just before we go there, a little bit, let's say, light relief. You seem to have, in your career, swum so sort of, I won't say easily, because I'm sure it was hard work for you, but you've moved between music and comedy and acting and film, and it always seems like a really light touch thing. You sort of pick up, you know, Ricky Gervais or the Black Eyed Peas or Mark Ronson, and I'm sure a huge amount of work went into that. But was there, you know, for young people kind of looking at you and saying, was there a game plan? Was there a strategy? Or what's the sort of advice for doing something that creative and sort of, you know, ending up looking back saying, wow, I can't believe this is what I do now for a living?
I will answer this question in part with a question, because when you started out as a journalist, did you think, I'll definitely, by this stage, at this point in the 2010s, 2020s, I'll write a book and get it published internationally? Did you think that?
I swore I'd never be a journalist. So that's my simple answer to that one.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. But you know, you learn a discipline, you get good at it, and you realize that it's a transferable skill. So for me, there was never like a huge plan or a layout. I knew I wanted to be an entertainer, and I'd never really tried it until I risked leaving youth work for stand-up. But as soon as I was in that world of entertainment and doing my job reasonably well, it was largely other people, colleagues, who would say, how come you've never done this? How come you've never done that? You know?
What's the biggest sort of plunge for you? A moment when, I mean, you describe really honestly about the times when you've actually frozen on stage, or the time when you ran out of things to say in an interview and you had to ask the audience what they were doing. I mean, it's always quite sort of reassuring, I think, for other people to hear the moments where you yourself were having these panicky moments. What was the biggest sort of on stage panic that you are able to still think
about? I've had some absolute nightmares, but also just like general nerves. I mean, I hosted a BAFTA event in Hollywood for like A-list stars all in the front row, and I was supposed to be ribbing them, you know, Samuel L. Jackson, Jodie Foster, Jennifer Lawrence, Tom Hanks. That was terrifying, but I didn't ruin it. I was fine. That went well. So I wouldn't include that necessarily, but I've had some moments where I've just thought, I wish the ground could swallow me whole. I did a big event with Colin Firth, but he was on Zoom and his Wi-Fi went, and then suddenly I had to entertain this whole crowd who just wanted to see Colin Firth, begging for the camera to come back on, and that was pretty painful. But I don't think anything tops Coventry. I was in Coventry doing stand-up. This must have been, I guess it would have been when my youngest daughter was very small, about 2 or 3 years old. So it would have been like 7 years ago, 7, 8 years ago. And I was on stage and it was not going well. Silence from the crowd. And in those moments, you can hear your lips smacking on the mic. You can hear the creak in the floorboards. And I was wearing this sort of little jacket with pockets. And I just sort of nervously put my hands in my pockets. And I felt some material in the right pocket. And I could feel the sweat on my brow. And I thought, it's a bad look to show that you're sweating. But I absentmindedly just pulled it out, went to dab my forehead. And it was a pair of my youngest girl's knickers. She was... she was potty training at the time, you know, and being a stand-up then, I was around most days. So I was doing a lot of that stuff. And you know how it is, you're a parent, right? You used to always have spare underwear and stuff like that for incidents, accidents and whatnot. But dying as I already was on stage, you know, if I was doing really well, I think I could have joked about it. But dying as I was on stage, I was mortified. I didn't even know how to begin to explain that I had a small girl's knickers in my pocket. It was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. I couldn't wait to get out of there.
Oh my God, that is the stuff. Yeah, yeah. Cold sweats at 3 a.m. I always thought that Doc Brown was your sort of artist name, but it was a school nickname, right?
It was a nickname to start with, and then I was rapping for fun, really, and you had to have a rap name, so it was just seemed the most natural thing to do.
But did they call you Doc Brown? I mean, that was from Back to the Future.
Yeah, like, I don't think anybody ever called me Doc Brown, but people called me Doc, and people still do. You know, I was with a bunch of friends last night, and it was just a reminder. Oh my gosh, yeah, like a lot of my oldest friends still call me Doc. So the Brown must have been a Back to the Future reference or something, or completion of that nickname. But I know the Doc was initially just from me I was a bit of a know-it-all really, and a bit of a nerd. So maybe it was a Back to the Future reference to begin with, but Yeah, that's what people called me, Doc, and I just sort of kept that when I started rapping. I'm not sure why I kept it when I started doing stand-up. Maybe it just felt like, you know, I could keep a distance between myself and the audience if I had.
Is that the hardest thing, do you think? Is stand-up the hardest thing that you've done?
Yeah. Yeah, I've never done anything harder than that in showbiz. Acting, hosting, writing, they all have their real challenges, but nothing is as sort of naked as stand up. Nothing, you're never on your own with it like you are with stand up, I think.
And Ricky Gervais gave you a call and he said, come and work with me. And I mean, one of the most recent ones was his Life on the Road movie, which is just, it's really painful.
Oh, it's excruciating.
It's excruciating, right? It's the story we should tell our viewers, the story of David Brent basically comes back as a traveling salesman who self-funds his way through a tour, and you end up sort of being forced to be his like almost paid for best mate, right?
Yeah.
Sort of sharing a room and all the rest of it. How did that work? Was it organic? Did he write all the stuff? Did you write it? Does it grow out of just conversations that you're having as a gang?
Combination of all of those three things. When Ricky had the idea, we were already writing songs and little sketches together for online stuff. The first thing we did, I think, was a sketch and a music video for Comic Relief for Richard Curtis. And that just got us thinking about silly musical ideas, and we were writing loads of those. And then he decided he wanted to make a movie, and he got me and another writer and actor and comic, Tom Basden, together, and the three of us just threw ideas around. And then Ricky wrote up a sort of skeleton script, and there'd be sections in there where Tom and I could either write stuff or improvise stuff. So it was a combination of all three.
They're awful, aren't they? I mean, there's just no other word. The songs are just meant to be the most uncomfortable thing you've ever listened to.
And it was actually a hard thing to do, because occasionally we'd accidentally write a good song, because Ricky is a songwriter, and he was a semi-successful, he's a professional singer before he was a comic, you know, and I did my thing in music before I was a comic. So we both know how to make songs, and we can both write melodies and lyrics and all of that kind of stuff. And he plays guitar pretty well. So occasionally we'd mess around, and by mistake we'd just write a good song, and we'd go, oh, I mean, that's not funny at all. It needs to. So it's quite a trick, because they couldn't be unlistenably bad. They had to be sort of fun, but they really had to be funny, and they had to be terrible in a slightly different way. They had to feel like they wanted to be good but weren't, you know. So it was a very specific tone we were going.
Yeah. So to finish up, you're embarking, I guess, in this lovely role with the West London Zone as ambassador. What would you like to look back on and say, I've done that, you know, that was a really good thing to have been able to do?
I think, look, I had a text a couple of days ago from a 21-year-old man who said, you know, I don't know if you remember me, my name's Amin. You used to work with me at this youth club in South Kilburn when I was very small. He said, you know, you always encouraged me. You always had a kind word for me. You always had a lot of time for me. And now I'm making music. I'm following my dream. And I wanted to say I really remember those days. They really kind of kicked me on and inspired me and helped me to focus. And I was so taken aback by it, you know, because when I look back, all I was doing was just being there. I was just putting the time in, really. And, you know, now that I'm a parent, I look at my kids and I think the main reason my kids are okay is because I put the time in. It's not anything really special and skillful, but I always showed them I was there for them, you know. And it's incredible the positive effects that can have on kids. So if any little bit I do to support what the workers are doing for West London adds to, you know, the incredible work they're already doing, and adds to the number of kids that you know, get through primary school, get through secondary school, and come out feeling confident that they can achieve something in their lives that brings them contentment, that's huge for me. That's absolutely huge for me. And for me, it's just like, I'm not going to be doing the hard work. That hard work's already being done, but I can raise awareness around it, and I can support those workers in the work that they do, you know, and that will just hopefully add a little bit of impetus, a little bit of energy to, like I say, the work that's already being done so well.
Ben Bailey-Smith, great to talk to you. Really lovely to have had this chat, and thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you. Cheers.